Okay, today we're going to talk about metabolism. We're going to go over the first part. So I'm going to go over the introduction and then the carbohydrate metabolism part of it. So, metabolism are all the chemical reactions that take place in an organism. Cellular metabolism include cellular chemical reactions that produce ATP to maintain homeostasis, and cellular functions such as growing, right, and division, breakdown and replacement of components of cell, processes like secretion, action potentials, and contraction, and then your body needs to build up energy reserves and store fuel for later use. How does it work? You take in food source, you break it down through the intestine into monomers, you pull it into the blood, then it circulates throughout the blood, goes into the interstitial fluid, and then goes into the cell, cytoplasm, and then those molecules are used for catabolism. Catabolism is a breakdown of organic molecules to make ATP, right? Catabolism starts in the cytoplasm and requires enzymes and cofactors, i.e., vitamins and minerals, to break down molecules to make ATP. So, overview, we take the triglycerides, the glycogen, and the proteins, we break them down into their monomers, right? And then we pull them into the cytosol, and then we pull them into the mitochondria for more metabolism. Once ATP is made, what the heck do we use it for? We use it to synthesize new organic molecules to replace components of the cell, right? So building up is anabolism. So anytime you're doing chemical reactions to build up stuff in the cell, we call it anabolism. I think of anabolic steroids as building muscle, so anabolism is building, and to maintain cellular functions, right? We also want to produce a nutrient pool that we can use in emergencies for fuel. First fuel usage is glucose, right? So we remember that from macromolecules. It's stored as glycogen in the liver and skeletal muscle. The liver, you'll pull from the liver to take the glycogen to break it down into glucose to dump it into the bloodstream, right? Skeletal muscle doesn't share so quickly. So skeletal muscle uses that glycogen for muscle contraction. The second fuel source is lipids. They're stored as triglycerides primarily in your adipocytes, but they can be stored in the liver. That's how we get fatty liver, right? And then your third fuel source is proteins. It's the most abundant in the cell, but it's used last. Why? Because they're functional, right? So you're not going to break down proteins when you use them or when you are using them for cellular processes. So metabolism is energy production by fuel degradation, which is catabolism, and then using the energy produced to maintain cell functions or homeostasis, like anabolism. For your body to carry out metabolism, it needs all of these things functioning. So you need your respiratory system to pull in oxygen, kick out CO2. You need the cardiovascular system to circulate oxygen, your digestive system to pull in nutrients, a well-balanced diet. You need those cofactors and coenzymes, right? So here's an overview of metabolism. You're pulling oxygen in. Oxygen is going from the lungs to the blood and then ultimately to the cell in the mitochondria. And you're making ATP. That is called cellular respiration or cellular metabolism. So you're pulling oxygen in to actually make ATP. A byproduct of that is CO2 production. And so CO2 needs to get kicked out of the lungs. Otherwise, it's going to shift the pH of the plasma. So here is a different picture. So these guys are going to get used for nutrient pool. You can use them for building up stuff and repairing, or you can break them down for a nutrient pool for catabolism to go into the mitochondria and make energy. 40% of that is going to be made as ATP. You can use those for you can use ATP for all of these. 80% is, or 60% is going to get lost as heat. So this is actually where we produce heat on a molecular level, or at the molecular level. Let's cover carbohydrate metabolism first. So carbohydrate metabolism is the easiest one out of all of them. And so we're going to look at glucose first. Glucose's molecular formula is C6H12O6 that combines with oxygen to make ATP. Now, the end goal is to make ATP. The water, the CO2, and the heat are byproducts. There should be one that says heat, are byproducts of this. One glucose molecule makes 38 ATP. Put an asterisk by that because it's 38 ATP, but we actually use 2 ATP, so it's 36 ATP for animal cells. Some of those ATP are made from substrate level phosphorylation. So that means that we're pulling phosphate off of some of those reactants and sticking it onto ATP. But most of those are used, most of the ATP is made in the electron transport chain. So electron transport chain is what it transports electrons, needs oxygen, and it makes a bunch of ATP, okay? The carbohydrate metabolism consists of 2 parts, glycolysis, which is considered to be under the umbrella of anaerobic metabolism. And then we have aerobic metabolism, which is Krebs citric acid cycle and electron transport chain. Aerobic metabolism is anything inside of that mitochondrion. Let's look at glycolysis first. So glycolysis is taking 1 glucose, which is 6 carbons, and ripping it down into 2 pyruvates, which are 3 carbons each. It occurs in the cytosol. And if the reaction occurs in the cytosol, it doesn't require oxygen. So no, that glycolysis is in the cytosol. It doesn't require oxygen, and it nets to ATP. Let's take a second to look at nets. It makes 4 ATP, and it uses 2 ATP. So the net is 2 ATP. These are the requirements. NAD plus is a cofactor or a coenzyme that we looked at when we were looking at micronutrients. It accepts electrons, and the goal of NAD plus is to grab 2 electrons, okay, right? 2 electrons and 1 proton. So what does it carry more of? Electrons. So is it an electron carrier or a proton carrier? It's an electron carrier. Okay, so here's NAD. It's going to grab these 2 electrons and 1 proton from these 2 hydrogens, and it is going to stick them on there, and you're going to have an H plus left over. Okay, so ion left over. So you can see just by doing this reaction, we have proton accumulation. So in actively respiring tissue, we're going to have a slightly lower pH. They're going to be more acidic because accumulation of H plus. Okay, what is the reasoning for NAD plus? NAD plus, it activates enzymes, and NAD plus grabs electrons and protons and takes them to the electron transport chain. So they're like a electron taxi cab. You have to have this, if you look down at NAD plus, you have to have this to get your enzymes to go for glycolysis and Krebs. And then this drops off the electrons and the proton at the electron transport chain, and it regenerates to this. Okay, so it kind of keeps toggling back and forth. You have to have NAD plus, and NADH has to drop off the electrons to regenerate to NAD plus. So you always have to have NAD plus and FAD plus to do metabolism. Let's look at glycolysis. So glycolysis is taking glucose through a series of reactions. You don't have to memorize all these reactions, but just so you have an idea of how they work. The first step is glucose getting converted to glucose 6-phosphate. You're using ATP for that. And then you're taking fructose 6-phosphate to fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. And you need another ATP for that, right? So we're using 2 ATP for the first portion. Look at what we're ending with though, 2 glyceraldehyde 3-phosphates. So we had 1 glucose and we have 2 glyceraldehyde 3-phosphates from that. Okay, so moving forward, this next step, the second part of glycolysis, this shows 1 glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, and we have 2 of them, so you have to double all of this, okay? So look at how we use an NAD plus here for this enzyme to work. We grab the electrons and protons. We're going to dump them off at the electron transport chain. We make 2 ATP here, and we make 2 ATP here. So then the totals for this one is 2 NADH, 4 ATP, and since we used 2 ATP at the beginning, we're going to net 2 ATP, okay? So the end of this is pyruvate. So we've made two pyruvates. So from one glucose, we've made two pyruvates. That's called glycolysis, and that occurs in the cytoplasm. We have made two NADHs, and we've net two ATP. I want you to write this down, write this down, write this down. Check yourself, check yourself, check yourself. You'll probably need to write this down 5 to 10 times just to get it. You don't have to do all the intermediates. You can start with glucose, take it to pyruvate. Tell me how many pyruvates you have, how many carbons each pyruvate is, hint, it's 3, and then what we make with that. So you're going to make 2 NADHs. You make 4 ATPs, but you use 2 ATPs, so your net is 2 ATPs. Okay, where does this occur? In the cytosol, and if it occurs in the cytosol, it is part of anaerobic metabolism. Anaerobic means without oxygen. Okay, all right, good. So now glucose has two choices. Pyruvate has two choices. It can get pulled into the mitochondria if there's enough oxygen, or if there isn't enough oxygen, then it can make lactic acid. Okay. And so let's say there's enough oxygen present. Pyruvic acid is going to get pulled into the mitochondria, and a carbon's going to get ripped off of it so that it stays in the mitochondria and gets converted to acetyl-CoA. Okay.